We all like choice, don't we? I mean, it's nice to have the freedom to choose what we want. We feel like since we've been here in Australia, we've made lots of choices about all sorts of things. What sort of car to buy. This last week we bought a washing machine. And so we had to decide which one did we want. And we actually bought one from new, which was nice. Especially nice for Karen, who does all the washing. Now, as we decided which one to buy, we had a website that had different washing machines, and you could pull them up next to each other on the screen on the website, and it was called Compare. You could compare one washing machine against another. And so that's what we did, and we used that grid in which to decide which one we wanted. Now, I wonder how you decide when you make choices. Are you the sort of person that just wants to stick with what you've had before and what you know? Or are you the sort of person that likes to dig into and research what it is that you're choosing? Now, what we choose, we rely on, don't we? For our washing machine, we're going to choose something that we're going to rely on. Therefore, we want it to work for us. It needs to achieve its purpose. So we need to choose wisely and make sure it's going to be a good one. Make sure it actually works. Now, today we're not talking about washing machines or cars or anything like that, but we are talking about priests, choosing between your priests. And we're going to see a comparison today of two different kinds of priests. So, choosing your priests. Well, the writer of Hebrews, remember that this is a letter to a group of people. He's been spending time. Dave was talking about this 2 weeks ago in chapters 4 and 5. He's taking his time to press home the point that the one that you rely on before God, to make you right with God, to stand between you and the wrath of God that comes against sin and sinners, needs dealing with very seriously. And so we see today he wants to press home the point why Jesus is a far better, a far more superior priest than the priests that they've had before in Judaism. And so let's remember who it is that this letter is addressed to. They are a group of people who have been oppressed. Let's just start again. They are Christians. They have decided to follow Jesus. They have begun their faith and their journey with excitement, but they are living in times that are difficult. They have the persecution of the Roman Empire, which recognizes Judaism, their former way of religion, as valid, but it doesn't recognize Christianity, those who follow Jesus. And so they find themselves suffering in hardship from the Romans, but also from the Jews, who think this is a joke. You guys are crazy following after Jesus. He is dead. He was not the Messiah. They reject them and their message about Jesus because they reject Jesus. And so the temptation for the people who are reading this letter is to say, well, it's just too hard following after Jesus. Maybe we'll just shrink back and fall back into the way of life that we had before. Fall back into what's comfortable. We've grown up as Jews, most of us. Let's just fall back into that system. Surely that's enough, isn't it? We're still relating to God. We're not forgetting God, are we? I mean, if we go back to that, surely what God has started in having the priestly system with the priests that come from the Levites, isn't that enough? Won't that be good enough? Well, the letter of the Hebrews wants them to say, no, it's not enough. It's certainly not enough. It's not even close, because that whole way of relating to God is now redundant. There is something far, far better for you to trust in and for you to enjoy. And it is a forever thing for us to enjoy. And so that word forever is going to ring out in this passage today in Hebrews 7, because it talks about a forever priest that forever works for us. He forever intercedes for us. Therefore, it's a forever promise for those of us who believe in it. So it is far better. And we're going to see that summarized for us at the end of this passage today in verse 25. It comes to the conclusion, and I believe it's a conclusion that these last few chapters have been leading up to as we're comparing priests. This is what verse 25 of chapter 7 says. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. Let's look into this a little bit more. So Melchizedek is a curious character. We come across him in Genesis chapter 14, that it says Abraham, who was the founder of the Jewish faith. He is the father of all people who come to know God, because God made a covenant promise with him of his descendants, and a covenant to be their God. And we've seen how that covenant is unfolded and finds its fulfillment in Jesus. But Abraham had just had a great victory before these other kings. And so he was greater than them. But then afterwards we're told he meets this king and priest called Melchizedek. And whilst he was superior to the others that he had just defeated, what he does when he comes before Melchizedek is to honor him. He bows down, he submits to a Melchizedek because he recognizes him as one who is ordained as a priest by God. He recognizes he is one worthy of his submission. And so what he does, he honors him and he gives him a tithe of everything that he has to honor Melchizedek. And so who is Melchizedek? Well, the details that we're given here tell us that he is of a priestly line that seems really vague to us, but yet we're confirmed in the Bible that it is a godly ordained priestly line. We don't know when it started or when it goes on till it says he is a priest forever. So this priestly line seems separate and runs separately than the line of Levites that God began with Moses and Aaron and established the way of relating to him through those priests. So this seems to be, there's the priestly line of Levites, but there's also one of Melchizedek, the order of Melchizedek. Now, what is to note of this is that he is a king and he is a priest. He is honored as one who is greater than Abraham. And he is known as a king of righteousness. And he was also the king of Salem, which is, I believe, formerly the town which we know as Israel now. As Jerusalem, was formerly known as Salem. And that is the same as the root of the word is shalom, which means peace. And so he is the king of righteousness and also the king of peace. Now, can you start to see some of these words, some of these phrases and titles are exactly what we hear about Jesus? King of righteousness, Prince of peace, a priest of a different line to the Levites. Remember, Jesus wasn't from the tribe of Levi, he was from the tribe of Judah. And so these points come through in this letter because they're important. Jesus' priesthood is under question. And so for those who are thinking of, well, maybe we just forget following Jesus and go back to the old ways, the people who this letter's written to, the temptation would be, well, can't we just rely on the system, the tried and tested, the one that we know? Surely that was good enough before. Can't we just trust that that's going to be good enough now? And the answer, of course, is no. And for those who might say, but is Jesus really a priest? Can we really trust him? That's exactly the point of this. Jesus is an other type of priest, just like Melchizedek was an other type of priest. Jesus is king and priest like Melchizedek. Jesus is one to be honored as greater than Abraham, as one who came like Melchizedek before the Levites were even born. before they were even installed as priests. So he comes before and he is greater. And he will continue on forever, because that's the Melchizedek's order continues forever somehow. And that is exactly what Jesus does. Years ago, before we moved to Ireland even, I had a great box that I could plug my guitar and my microphone into and plug it into the computer. And I could sing and I could play and I could record it all on my computer. It was a wonderful bit of kit. But what happened over time was that as my computer needed upgrading, as software updates needed to happen to computers, all of a sudden this box that I thought was brilliant, could do everything, all of a sudden couldn't do what I bought it for anymore. It needed too many updates. The only way I could have kept using it is if I was using a computer over 10 years old, which didn't happen for me because my computers didn't last that long. They would break down. But also, even if I did have a computer that I was able to keep for over 10 years, I could not have updated the system at all. I would have needed a system that was over 10 years old. And as you may know from your own experience, they don't keep supporting systems that are that old. It's the operating system went on and my equipment got left behind. Therefore, it became redundant. What I once valued is now worth nothing. And it's the same with this religion that people are drawn back to in Judaism. But it's not just. Let's just move a little bit from this context for a minute to our context. Whether it's here in Australia where I am, or whether it's where you are, we all trust in something to come between us and God, don't we? If we were to be asked at the end of our life, why would you be allowed into heaven? For what reason would you give? Lots of people would say, well, I've tried my best, I've been good. I can only hope that I'd get there, but here I am, and so will you let me in? I've tried to be good. So we're allowing our goodness to stand between, our attempts at goodness to stand between us as sinners and God who is holy and hates sin. It's not going to cut it, the Bible says. But what about relying on our religious credentials? To say, well, hey, look, I did go to church when I was younger. Maybe I've done if you've gone through a Catholic system, which I know many of you have there in Ireland, I've been baptized and I've done my christening and confirmation, first communions, confessions. I've done these things. Don't they give me some sort of credit? Don't they stand for something before God? And what about, I've listened to the priests and I've gone to church or to mass, and these people will vouch for me. They can still vouch for me, can't they? Well, the point of Hebrews is that any system that we rely on that replaces Jesus is redundant. They've all had their day, but no longer have their place. So that was the same in the time of Hebrews, trusting in the priest and the Levitical priesthood system of Judaism no longer cuts a mustard. It just doesn't do it for them because Jesus is there. It's how you respond to Jesus. We can't ignore Jesus and replace him with somebody else because Jesus is essential and he is far, far better than anything else that we can lean on or trust in to make us right before God, to come between us and God who has wrath and anger and cannot stand sin. We stand in a horrible problem. We have a horrible condition and it needs to be dealt with. And only one person, and he is a king and he is a perfect forever high priest, can do that, and his name is Jesus. Let's look a little bit more at what we saw in verse 25, unpacking a little bit more of why the conclusion is that Jesus is the superior high priest who is forever. So verse 25 says that Jesus can save to the uttermost. It says, consequently, he's able to save to the uttermost. Now, that word uttermost means entirely, like completely. So you're not left hoping or wishing that something's going to work for you. No, Jesus can save us from our sin and from the wrath of God like nothing else can. He can do it entirely and completely. So there is that sense of uttermost that means the completeness of it. But there is also a sense of uttermost that means forever, ongoing. It is uttermost in that it is an ongoing thing. That Jesus can save us not just now and today, but ongoing. I mean, this is one thing that made Jesus' priesthood so different, wasn't it? We saw that in Dave's sermon a couple of weeks ago. Jesus' priesthood so different from those who were part of the Levitical priesthood system, the priest that they still had in the Jewish system, that say to them, I can offer a sacrifice for you, but I also need to offer a sacrifice for my own sin because I'm a sinner. And we're going to have to keep on doing this, guys, because God needs to continually be, you need continuous intercession. Therefore, we're going to have to keep offering sacrifices day after day. Now, we know that Jesus is different because he gave a sacrifice that was once and for all, and that was the sacrifice was himself, but he lives on forever. Jesus will never become redundant. And we're told that at the end of chapter 25. How can he save us to the uttermost, as in forever, ongoing? It says, since he always lives to make intercession for them. And so that's how Jesus can do what others can't, because Jesus never dies. Jesus always will be. He always lives. And he lives forever to intercede for you and for me. And that's wonderful. That's what makes Jesus far better, far more superior, is because he saves completely and to the uttermost, and it's an ongoing thing. We can be assured forever. And so therefore, our salvation is a promise that is secure for today, for tomorrow, for next month and next year, next decade, and forever, until Jesus returns and we are made new and our sin is no longer an issue. But yet Jesus will continue with us and we continue with him forever as well. So it's a promise, and it's based on a covenant. The way that that's the way that we relate with God now. And it's so good. Far better than anything that was before. And so just like my problem with the computer and my box to plug in my instruments and microphone, they were good for a time. They had a purpose for a time, but then they needed to be replaced. And we're like that with everything, aren't we? You know, we need to replace phones and cars, like I was saying at the beginning of this video. And we do worry as a consumer, how long will this last? When will I have to upgrade again? And here's the great thing about Jesus as our priest, as our great high priest and intercessor, that he is forever. We never need to worry about this becoming redundant. We never need to worry again about maybe there's something new, maybe there's something else that's going to come and take my fancy, or something that I will need in Christianity or in my life alongside Christianity or anything else. All we need is Jesus Christ. All we need is him as our perfect, forever high priest and king who will save us to the uttermost. And so the end there of, in the middle part actually of verse 25 says, he's able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him. And that's what he does. Jesus draws us to God because he can. As the Son of God, the one sent by God, given his priesthood and his kingship himself by God. He's not one that we can ignore. He's not one that we can discount or disregard. Instead, Jesus' credentials as a priest are really clearly given here in Hebrews. That we can trust him. Therefore, we trust that we can be drawn into the presence of God. We draw near to him, the God who loves us. He has provided all of this for us. Yes, he is a God of wrath who hates sin, but he is also a God of love who has provided the way for us to draw near to him. And the way is Jesus. That's what God has given us in his love and in his mercy. He's given us one who stands between us forever. And so, what about you? What are the temptations that are clinging onto you right now? The ones that draw your mind and your heart sometimes to think, oh, it's just hard being a Christian. And I know what it's like in Ballina and in Ireland. There's really not many Christians around. You're a minority. People will give you a hard time. People will think that you are weird for hanging on so tightly to Jesus. But is it worth it? Absolutely. Hebrews here says it is worth it, because any other system of religion, any other thing that you will trust on to make you right with God and to deal with your sin is worthless. It's old, it's obsolete, it's redundant. Jesus is the only way. It is a far better way. Jesus is superior to anything else. And so let's keep reading Hebrews with a great anticipation as things become clearer for us why Jesus is far better than anything else. And we're going to look next week at understanding more about the covenant, how we now relate to God because we have a forever high priest who is Jesus. So let's rejoice in that today. Let's be challenged by that today. There may be things that you need to set right in your heart and your mind, things that you were tempted to be drawn back into or hold on to instead of Jesus to give you confidence. You'll have to address that. If you want to talk to somebody, please do. If you have questions, please ask Dave or ask me. And we'd love to help you continue to see Jesus as far better and superior than anything else.